Washington, D.C., September 29, 1940. Picture this moment. Vannevar Bush, the most powerful scientist in America, sits at a conference table surrounded by the brilliant minds who will shape the future of warfare. Around him are millionaire physicists, representatives from Bell Labs and General Electric, military leaders, all waiting to see what the British delegation has brought across the Atlantic. They've been told it's important, but nothing could prepare them for what's about to happen. A British physicist named Sir Henry Tizard reaches into a wooden crate, carefully packed with protective padding, and lifts out something that looks almost ordinary at first glance. A copper cylinder about the size of a hockey puck, with 8 holes around its edge, cooling fins, and a pair of small antenna loops. It weighs maybe 2 pounds. Tizard places it gently on the table between them, and in a calm voice says words that will echo through history. This is a cavity magnetron. It produces 10,000 watts of microwave power at 10-centimeter wavelength. For a moment, there's silence. Someone asks him to repeat those numbers because they simply can't believe what they've just heard. Tizard repeats them calmly. 10,000 watts, 10 centimeters. Vannevar Bush picks up the device, turning it over in his hands, his mind racing. You see, the best American magnetron, developed after years of exhausting work and millions of dollars, could barely produce 500 watts at 1 meter wavelength. This British device sitting in his hands produces 20 times more power at 1/10 the wavelength. The implications crash over him like waves. Shorter wavelengths mean you can use smaller antennas. Smaller antennas mean radar systems that can actually fit inside aircraft, inside ships, inside vehicles that move and fight. More power means you can detect enemy planes and ships at much greater distances, get clearer images, see through storms and darkness with a precision nobody thought possible. Someone finally asks the obvious question. How long have you had this? Tizard's answer is stunning. We demonstrated the first working model in February. That was 7 months ago. 7 months during which Britain has been fighting for its very survival against Nazi Germany. And during all that time they've been developing this incredible technology. And now, they're simply handing it over to America, a country that isn't even in the war yet. The meeting stretches on for hours as the full picture emerges. The British delegation, led by Tizard and including radar expert Eddie Bowen, hasn't just brought the magnetron. They've brought complete technical documents for jet engines designed by Frank Whittle, blueprints for proximity fuses that can make artillery shells explode near their targets without even hitting them directly, designs for plastic explosives, rocket weapons, submarine detection equipment, methods for protecting ships against magnetic mines, research on defending against chemical warfare, everything Britain has learned in the first desperate year of war. But it's the magnetron that holds everyone's attention. Bush understands immediately what this means for the future of warfare. Alfred Loomis, whose private laboratory at Tuxedo Park has become a secret hub for cutting-edge research, keeps firing questions, his brilliant mind already racing toward practical applications. How stable is the frequency? What's the pulse repetition rate? Can this be manufactured in large quantities? The British answer every single question, holding nothing back, no secrets, no conditions, no strings attached. They've actually brought 2 magnetrons in case one gets damaged in transit. And one did get damaged, showing just how fragile and precious these devices are. They're offering complete access to the research teams at Birmingham University where the device was developed. They'll share everything they know about manufacturing it, optimizing it, integrating it into working radar systems. Finally, Loomis asks the question everyone's thinking. Why? Why give this to us? Why not keep it for yourselves? Tizard's answer is heartbreakingly simple and honest. Because we may not survive long enough to fully develop it, and because if we fall, this technology cannot fall with us. The room goes completely quiet. These American scientists, safe in Washington while London burns under nightly bombing raids, suddenly understand the terrible reality Britain is facing. Britain is offering up its most precious secrets because it genuinely might not exist in 6 months. German invasion barges are gathering across the English Channel. The Luftwaffe is bombing British cities every single night. Convoys bringing food and supplies are being slaughtered by U-boats in the Atlantic. Britain is fighting completely alone and losing ground every day. But that's not the only reason. And Tizard explains the cold calculation behind this generosity. Britain simply doesn't have the industrial capacity to mass-produce these technologies while simultaneously fighting for survival. British factories are being bombed regularly, resources are stretched beyond breaking point, workers are exhausted. American industry, protected by 3,000 miles of ocean, can manufacture these devices in quantities Britain could never dream of achieving. American research laboratories, with their funding intact and facilities untouched by war, can push the technology further and faster than Britain ever could. It's a calculated gamble with impossibly high stakes. Give America the tools to win the war. Hope desperately that America will actually enter the war. And pray that Britain survives long enough to see any of it happen. The Americans begin to truly grasp the magnitude of what they're being handed. This isn't just a technology transfer between allies. This is Britain betting its entire technological advantage, everything it has developed through brilliant innovation and desperate necessity, on American capability and eventually American intervention. In the days and weeks that follow, the British delegation travels to laboratories across the entire country, demonstrating the magnetron and sharing their knowledge everywhere they go. At Bell Labs in New Jersey, they show it to engineers who've been struggling with radar development for years and who literally gasp when they see what it can do. At General Electric in Schenectady, they share manufacturing techniques that American engineers didn't know were possible. At the Naval Research Laboratory, they explain submarine detection methods in detail. At Wright Field in Ohio, they discuss aircraft applications with military pilots and engineers. Everywhere they go, the reaction is exactly the same. Initial shock and disbelief, followed by an explosion of excited questions, then a sudden rush to understand all the implications. At Loomis's laboratory at Tuxedo Park, the magnetron demonstration turns into an impromptu seminar that lasts until 3 in the morning, with scientists scribbling calculations and sketching designs by lamplight. Scientists who've been working on meter-wave radar, which can barely detect large ships and aircraft, suddenly see the possibility of centimeter-wave systems that could detect something as small as a submarine periscope breaking the surface, map terrain from a flying aircraft, guide anti-aircraft fire with precision they'd thought was pure science fiction. Ernest Lawrence, who would later win the Nobel Prize, examines the magnetron and immediately sees how its principles could be applied to particle accelerator design. Luis Alvarez starts sketching ideas for airborne radar systems right there at the table. Isidore Rabi begins calculating how the device could be optimized for different frequencies and different military applications. The British have brought their gift to exactly the right people. These aren't just engineers following blueprints. These are some of the most creative and brilliant scientific minds in the entire world, suddenly given access to technology that opens entirely new fields of possibility they'd never even imagined. At MIT, where the British demonstrate the magnetron in early October, the response is immediate and overwhelming. Within just weeks, plans are underway to establish a dedicated laboratory focused entirely on radar development. They'll call it the Radiation Laboratory, though it has absolutely nothing to do with radiation. The name is deliberate misdirection, meant to hide the fact that America's best physicists are about to be concentrated in one secret location to develop military technology based on British secrets. By February 1941, just 5 months later, the Rad Lab is fully operational. Within a year, it employs 4,000 people. By the war's end, nearly 17,000 scientists and engineers will work there. It will produce more than half of all the radar systems used by American forces throughout the entire war. The cavity magnetron will be refined, perfected, mass-produced, and installed in aircraft, ships, submarines, and ground installations across every theater of war in Europe, the Pacific, North Africa, and everywhere American forces fight. But standing in that Washington conference room in September 1940, the Americans are still processing the sheer magnitude of what they've been given. Some of them understand the strategic implications immediately. their minds already racing ahead to production schedules and deployment plans. Others need time to absorb it, to wrap their minds around technology that seems almost like magic. A few are skeptical, wondering if there's a hidden catch, some fatal flaw in the technology that the British aren't mentioning, some reason they're really giving it away. There's no catch. The British are simply desperate, and desperate enough to be extraordinarily generous. Tizard himself is a fascinating choice to lead this crucial mission. He's 64 years old, a distinguished physical chemist who helped develop aircraft instrumentation during the First World War. In the 1930s, he chaired the committee that oversaw Britain's entire radar development program, the same committee that funded the research leading to the cavity magnetron's creation. He understands both the complex science and the delicate politics involved. He knows how to talk to military officers and government officials in language they understand. He knows how to convince skeptical Americans that Britain isn't trying to dump failed experiments or second-rate technology on them. And he knows how to make the compelling case that helping Britain is ultimately in America's own national interest, whether America realizes it yet or not. Because the technology Britain is sharing isn't just useful for defense, for protecting ships and detecting incoming bombers. It's incredibly useful for offense, for striking back, for winning battles. Radar that can see through clouds means bombers that can navigate and strike accurately in any weather, day or night. Proximity fuses mean anti-aircraft fire that doesn't need impossible direct hits to bring down enemy planes. Jet engines mean aircraft that can fly faster than anything the enemy has. These are tools for winning wars, not just barely surviving them. The Americans begin to understand that Britain isn't just desperately asking for help. Britain is offering a genuine partnership between equals. Share our technology freely. Build on it with your incredible industrial might and manufacturing capacity. And together we'll create weapons that can actually defeat Germany and win this war. Some of the American scientists who examined the magnetron that September day would later say it was the single most important device brought to America during the entire war. That might sound like exaggeration, but it's really not. The cavity magnetron enabled the development of microwave radar, which in turn enabled aircraft to navigate and bomb through solid clouds, and at night when visibility is zero. It enabled anti-submarine warfare that could detect periscopes and surfaced U-boats at night in the middle of the Atlantic. It enabled ground-controlled interception that could guide fighter planes onto enemy bombers in complete darkness. It enabled naval fire control systems that could engage targets beyond visual range, hitting ships over the horizon. It enabled blind bombing systems that could find and accurately hit targets in any weather conditions. It enabled airborne early warning systems that could detect incoming enemy raids while they were still far out to sea, giving defenders precious time to prepare. Every single one of these crucial capabilities depended on microwave radar, which depended entirely on the cavity magnetron. Without it, the war would have been longer, bloodier, cost millions more lives, and might very well have ended differently. The British knew this with absolute certainty. That's exactly why they were willing to hand it over to a nation that wasn't even fighting yet, that might never fight. That's why Tizard was authorized to share everything, hold absolutely nothing back, trust completely that American scientists would use the technology well, and eventually use it in the same war Britain was fighting alone. It was an extraordinary act combining faith and desperation in equal measure. At Tuxedo Park, after the formal presentations were done and the technical demonstrations completed, Loomis pulled Tizard aside privately. Loomis was 52 years old, a former banker who'd made an absolute fortune on Wall Street and then retired early to pursue his true passion, physics. His private laboratory had become a gathering place for top scientists from around the world. He had the personal resources to fund important research and the connections to make things happen in Washington. He asked Tizard the question that had been bothering him all day, the dark possibility everyone was thinking about but nobody wanted to say out loud. What if we can't help you in time? What if Britain falls before we can get this technology into mass production? Tizard's response was recorded by several people who were present, and it's chilling in its honesty. Then at least the technology will survive, and whoever fights Germany next will have it. That's worth the risk. The Americans in the room understood exactly what he was saying. Britain might lose this war. The German invasion might succeed. London might fall. The government might have to evacuate or surrender. But the knowledge, the capability, the potential to fight back against Nazi Germany, that would survive in American laboratories and American factories, ready to be used by whoever continued the fight. It was a kind of technological insurance policy, purchased with Britain's most valuable secrets, bought with everything they had. Over the following weeks, as the British delegation completed its tour of American facilities and prepared to return home across the dangerous Atlantic, the Americans began to act with remarkable speed. The radiation laboratory was established at MIT. Contracts were signed with major manufacturers. Research programs were launched with substantial funding. The cavity magnetron went into production. By 1942, American factories were producing thousands upon thousands of radar sets based on British technology, improved and refined by American engineering, manufactured with American industrial capacity and efficiency. And miraculously, Britain survived. The German invasion never came. Hitler turned his attention east toward Russia instead. The Blitz eventually ended as the Luftwaffe shifted focus. The war continued, grinding and terrible. And when America finally entered the war in December 1941 after Pearl Harbor, it entered with technology that was already being mass-produced, already being refined and improved, already being deployed in the field. The TIZARD mission had succeeded beyond even its most optimistic goals. The technology had been successfully transferred. The Americans had built on it brilliantly. The partnership had worked exactly as planned. And the magnetron, that simple copper cylinder the size of a hockey puck, had become the beating heart of the radar systems that helped win the war in the air, on the sea, and eventually on the ground as Allied forces pushed into Europe. But in September 1940, standing in that conference room in Washington, none of that victory was certain or even likely. The Americans were still processing what they'd been shown, still trying to wrap their minds around it. Some of them were already thinking about practical applications, about how to integrate this technology into weapon systems, about production challenges and manufacturing timelines. Others were still stuck on the basic fact of it, on the sheer audacity of Britain handing over its most advanced military technology to a neutral nation that might never enter the war. Vannevar Bush, who understood grand strategy as well as any scientist in America, saw the deeper game being played. Britain was making America a partner in this war, whether America officially wanted to be one or not. By sharing this technology so freely, by making American factories essential to producing it, by involving American scientists deeply in developing it, Britain was tying American interests directly to British survival in a way that political speeches never could. It was brilliant. It was desperate. It was absolutely necessary. And it worked perfectly. The scientists who were in that room, who held that magnetron in their hands, who understood immediately what it meant for the future of warfare, they became passionate advocates. They pushed hard for the radiation laboratory. They pushed for immediate production. They pushed for integration into military systems. They became personally invested in the technology and therefore invested in the war effort that would use it, even before America officially entered the war. Some of them would later reflect on that pivotal moment, on the day the British opened that wooden crate and showed them the future of warfare sitting on a conference table. They'd remember their initial shock and disbelief, their growing excitement as they understood the implications, their sudden realization that the war they'd been watching safely from across the ocean was about to become their war too, whether America officially entered it or not. Because you simply can't take another nation's most precious secrets, build on them, profit from them, improve them, and then stand aside doing nothing when that nation is fighting desperately for its life against evil. The TIZARD mission created a moral obligation as well as a technological partnership. And the British understood this perfectly. That's exactly why they sent TIZARD, a respected scientist and skilled diplomat, rather than a military officer making demands. That's why they brought the actual physical magnetron, rather than just sending blueprints and technical drawings. That's why they demonstrated it in person, face to face. They wanted the Americans to hold it, examine it, understand it deeply, because they were creating human relationships and bonds of trust, not just transferring technical data. And the Americans responded, not immediately with military intervention because that would take the shock of Pearl Harbor, but with genuine commitment to the technology, to the research, to the production. By the time America officially entered the war in December 1941, it entered with radar systems that were in many ways more advanced than what Britain itself had managed to deploy. The student had learned from the teacher and then surpassed them, which was exactly what Britain had hoped and prayed would happen. The cavity magnetron wasn't the only important technology that came from the teasered mission. The jet engine designs would lead directly to America's first jet aircraft. The proximity fuse would completely revolutionize anti-aircraft warfare and artillery, saving countless lives. The plastic explosive formulas would be used in thousands of demolition operations across Europe. The submarine detection methods would help turn the tide in the brutal Battle of the Atlantic. But the magnetron was the symbol of it all. It was the device that sat on the table that September day, the physical object that represented everything the mission was about. British innovation and courage, American production and industrial might, shared purpose, technological partnership, and desperate hope for survival. When Tizard returned to Britain in October, sailing back across the dangerous Atlantic where U-boats hunted Allied ships, he reported to his superiors that the mission had been a complete success. The Americans had received the technology enthusiastically, with genuine excitement and understanding. They were already planning large-scale production. They understood the terrible urgency. They would build on what Britain had started. What he didn't report, because he couldn't possibly know it yet, was that he'd helped set in motion the technological collaboration that would define the entire Allied war effort. The radiation laboratory would become a model for other research centers across America. The relationships formed during the mission would last throughout the entire war and long beyond. The trust established in those early meetings would enable many other technology transfers, other collaborations, other shared developments that would prove crucial. The scientists who'd been in that Washington conference room would go on to lead major research programs, advise military commanders at the highest levels, develop new weapons, and help win the war. Many of them would later say that the teasered mission was the exact moment they truly understood that science and technology would determine the war's outcome as much as courage or military strategy. They'd been shown the future of warfare in the form of a copper cylinder with 8 holes and cooling fins. They had held it in their hands with their own fingers. They'd understood what it could do, what it would mean for the war, and they'd committed themselves completely to making it real, to producing it in massive quantity, to deploying it effectively across all theaters, to using it to win this war against fascism. That was what the American scientists said when Britain handed them the technology that would help win the war. They said yes. They said, "We understand what you're giving us and why you're trusting us with it." They said, "We'll build on this and make it even better." They said, "We'll make this work, we promise." And they absolutely did. The cavity magnetron went into full production in 1941. By 1942, it was being installed in aircraft, ships, and ground stations across the military. By 1943, microwave radar was standard equipment throughout the American military. By 1944, it was helping guide the massive bomber formations that were systematically destroying Germany's industrial capacity. The ships that were finally winning the Battle of the Atlantic. The fighters that were achieving air superiority over Europe. The technology Britain had been willing to give away in its darkest hour. The secrets they'd been desperate enough to share with a neutral nation had been multiplied by American industrial capacity and returned to the war 100-fold stronger. British innovation, American production, shared victory. That was the bargain Tizard offered in September 1940. That was the bargain the Americans accepted with open hands and minds. That was the partnership that helped win the war and save the world from Nazi tyranny. And it all started with a copper cylinder sitting on a conference table in Washington, with American scientists staring at it in absolute disbelief, with British physicists calmly explaining what it could do, with everyone in the room gradually understanding that they were witnessing something truly historic. The moment when Britain trusted America with its most valuable secrets. The moment when America accepted the enormous responsibility that came with that trust. The moment when the technological partnership that would help defeat Nazi Germany was born. What did the American scientists say when they held that magnetron in their hands? They said this changes everything we thought we knew about warfare. They said we can build on this and make it even better. They said we understand what you're giving us and what it means for the world. They said yes, absolutely yes. And then they rolled up their sleeves and got to work. And they didn't stop working until the war was won.